That's right.
Thank you so much. You're back in order. Probably the same stations now.
The chair in front of me is driving I'm good, thank you so much. I'm good.
What happened?
You're fine. We're just not watching.
Oh.
Hello.
It's a live stream and you can see it.
Yeah, no,
No, it's a live stream. Right?
We are technically, I know we're all in trouble when I say that, but technically we are live streaming Zoom.
Okay.
And so we're turning the monitor off because we're not interacting with the Zoom in the space, but the folks on the live stream can still see the room.
Can they see each other?
And they cannot see each other.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so the hope is we're just expanding our reach to folks who can't make it in. Yeah. So, listen.
Are we doing that for the hieroglyphics
And I
or?
thought, so this technology that we're using for the chapel services is a little bit different than what we're doing in the sanctuary. For the sanctuary, we're not using Zoom at all. We're using just a live stream. It's a much more reliable and more high quality experience. Again, folks can't see each other, but we do have a comment box open so that they can comment to each other. So for the High Holy Days and for Friday evenings, basically for when we're in the sanctuary, that's what we're doing. Yes. So spirituality is now very much intertwined with technology, as actually it always has been, right? There was a time when our people before the printing press could not even pray from a book. So that was the radical technology, right, of the 15th century. And now we have new technology today, again, expanding our reach and hopefully embracing more people into our Jewish community. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom to everyone here in the chapel. Shabbat Shalom to our community on the live stream. We're all so glad to be together and have this opportunity to celebrate Shabbat and also to be in the very intense time of the month of Elul, not only the Hebrew month preceding the High Holy Days, but also in this very moment, the day before the evening of Slichot, which is that very first service of the High Holy Days season, what our cantors call the opening ceremonies. And what's interesting about Slichot is you get to hear a lot of those High Holy Day tunes and also the High Holy Day liturgy. And what's interesting to me is in Slichot, we get some of the Yom Kippur liturgy that we actually won't hear up front in Rosh Hashanah, right? Rosh Hashanah coming first, and then we'll wait and hear it again. So it's a little taste of things like Vidui, the confession, which actually we won't hear for another 2 weeks, and bringing it all together as we begin. So that's tonight. But right now, to be present in this moment, it's good to be together this Shabbat. I welcome you to sing and to participate and to create as much energy as we can together in this chapel. And let's first just take a moment to turn around and find someone new to greet. You know a lot of people already.
Hello, everyone.
I'm Joel. I'm Shabbat.
On page 74, these words, the first verse of the prayer includes these words from the Torah that welcome us into our tent every morning. So on page 74, we begin with Ma Tovu. Ma Tovu, Ohad L'Hayavo, Mishkatzah Yisrael. Ma Tovu, Ohad L'Hayavo, Page 86. With the intent to study Torah as a part of every day of our lives, we begin each morning with a blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. At the bottom of the page, O Adonai, our God, let the words of Torah be sweet in our mouths and the mouths of your people Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of all your people Israel, may know you by studying your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, hamlamed Torah Lo Yisrael. And to offer to us a text so we complete that mitzvah by enacting it. We read together on the middle of page 88, this text from the Mishnah. These are things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer and making peace among people, with the study of Torah encompasses them all. Page 108. Please rise. Baruch hu Adonai, Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Vaed. On the top of page 111, together. In the beginning, even then, a new light was sown for the righteous, a promise that eager light would become the catalyst, first for order and then for hope. Author of language and light, help us to use words as you have, to cast light into dark waters, and draw out justice and truth. Baruch atah Adonai, Yosef HaMelech. On the top of page 113, together, once or twice in a lifetime, a man or woman may choose a radical believing. Having heard the Lacha will go forth, God disturbs us toward our destiny by hard events and by freedom's now urgent voice, which explode and confirm who we are. We don't like leaving, whether God loves becoming. Baruch atah Adonai, Habocher ve'amon Yisrael v'ahav. Page 114. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Elohim, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kivod Le'olam Vaed. Please be seated. On the middle of page 116, let us read together. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign in your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and be holy to your God. I, Adonai, your God, brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai, your God. Page 122. Mi chamocha elim Adonai, mi chamocha Nadar kodesh, nor zehilot, o sefela, nor zehilot, o sefela. Shirach hashash kivul yunim, leshimchas vatayam, yachad kulom, oduim michom amru, Adonai yimot le'olam vaed. Sower Yisrael, kuma be'ezrat Yisrael, u'teinu mecha, Yehuda Yisrael. Go Aleinu, Adonai Tzvaot Shalom, Kadosh Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai, Yisrael. Page 124 and following. Please rise. Adonai sekatayita ufia yitmilatah. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Eloheinu b'motinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. El Hagatul Hagibur Hanoram El Yon Gomel Hasatim Tovim Nekodeh Hakol Bezocher Haste Avot Ve'imavot Umevi Gula V'nenetam Lanam Shemo Ve'ahavam Melech Ozer Moshiach Magin Baruch Atah Adonai Ma'ayin Ratzara Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayei HaKol Atah Rav Moshiach Mechapori Atah Mechakel Chaim B'Chesed Mechayei HaKol B'Racham Yirachim Somech Rolim Rofet Olim Umatir Rasulim Umekayim Emunato Mishenei Achad Mikamocha Bagurot Umidol B'Halav Melech Mimit Urchayei Umatzmiach Yeshua Ne'manata L'Hachayot HaChol Baruch Atah Adonai Mechayei HaChol. On page 131, our Siddur includes the very passage from Kedoshim we read on Yom Kippur afternoon. So as we prepare for that, let us read on page 131 this passage together. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the whole community of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I am holy. You shall each revere your father and your mother, and keep my Sabbaths. When you reap your harvest, leave the corners and the gleanings for the poor and the stranger. You shall not steal. You shall not deal deceitfully or falsely with one another. You shall not swear falsely by my name. You shall not defraud your neighbor. You shall not commit robbery. The wages of the worker shall not remain with you until morning. You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall not render an unfair decision. Do not favor the poor or show deference to the rich. Judge your neighbor fairly. Do not go as a talebearer. Do not profit from the blood of your neighbor. You shall not hate your kinfolk in your heart. Reprove your neighbor, but incur no guilt doing so. Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your kinfolk. Love your neighbor as yourself. I am Adonai. Please be seated. Turning to the middle of page 141, let us join together in our blessing for peace. Grant us peace, your most precious gift, of eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. Make contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of our world. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Praised are you, Adonai, who blesses your people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, avarech et amo Yisrael v'shalom. We take these moments for silent prayer. Oh, say shalom b'rama, Uya say shalom aleinu, Ne'el Yisrael, V'imru, amen. Oh, say shalom b'rama, Uya say shalom aleinu, Ne'el Yisrael, V'imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'chol Yisrael. 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 We continue on page 244 with Seder Kriyat HaTorah, a service for the reading of Torah. Happy is the one who finds wisdom, the one who gains understanding, for its value is greater than silver, its yield than fine gold. It is more precious than rubies. No treasure can match it. Please rise. Page 246. Please be seated. They're like an angel reading my mind, showing up just when I need help. All right, this Shabbat, we are reading from Parshat Kitavo, and the blessings for the Aliyah in the prayer book on page 250, the portion is in the large blue book, the Cloud Torah commentary, and if you don't have them, there should be some on the bookcases. And I'm looking at page 1508, Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 5. And as we get settled, I'll ask, let's see, would somebody like to come serve as Gabbai? So following with your finger, following the Hebrew with your finger up here next to me. I will show you where you'd like to do that. Anyone like to do that? Serve as Gabbai, you have to have really good, strong Hebrew. I'll do it, but, okay, excellent. You already graced us with physical strength, right? Susan, thank you. All right, so I'm going to be in verse 5 right here. And who has not had an Aliyah in a while? Who has not had an Aliyah in a while? Steve Merman, please come forward. And before Steve begins, I'll just say we're towards the end of the book of Deuteronomy in Parshat Kitavo. Lots of do's and don'ts and blessings and curses, consequences as a result. And a lot of what we read in Deuteronomy at this point sounds a little repetitive. We've heard, maybe you've heard this before. Maybe it's been listed in other parts of the Torah, maybe it's just from last year, but maybe you've heard this before. And so you may start to hear some of that repetition if you're looking around in the English for some of that material. But we'll just read a part. I'm looking at verse 5, so it's towards the beginning of the portion, not at the very beginning. Just find it here. Okay. All right. Amen. Ve'anita ve'amarta lifnei Adonai Elohecha arami olehiravi vayeret Mitzrayma vayigar sham b'tei me'at vayihi sham legoy gadol atzum b'ra'av vayareu otanu Amitzrayim ve'anunu vayitnu aleinu avodah kasha vanit el Adonai Elohei avotenu vayishma Adonai et kaleinu vayar et anenu ve'et amaleinu ve'et lechatzenu.
Asher natan lanu Torah kamet, v'chayei olam
Amen. Thank you. All right, so. All of these do's and don'ts in the book of Deuteronomy, I think that the reason this passage stuck out to me as I studied this week was actually, it's a sad reason, but I think the reason is because of the anti-Semitism that I've been reading about, and this just, it pulled me in as one of these very old original forms of what it means to judge another group negatively and to blame another group. And so let's take a look at this passage, and then I thought I would just share some thoughts about what's going on in the world and hear your own thoughts as well. So if we look at just verse 5, it's this callback to something we hear again and again. You shall then recite as follows before the eternal, your God. My father was a fugitive Aramaean. Where is that familiar? The Gada, right? Pesach, right? We have these core stories and they just keep coming back. They are our souls. My father was a fugitive Aramaean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there. But there he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to the Lord, to the Eternal, the God of our fathers and mothers, and the Eternal heard our plea and saw our plight, our misery, and our oppression. And that's the turning point in this story of the Seder, the story of the Exodus and the Haggadah, right? When God hears our plea, when God hears our cry. What is going on, just to be explicit, why in a week when I'm reading about anti-Semitism and thinking about related topics, why is that this passage jumping out at me in this Torah portion? Just to be clear, is that clear to everyone? Who can make it abundantly clear?
Well, to me, every night on the news, we're looking at this mess in Afghanistan and all this pushback. Should we bring them in? Should we not do that? Will countries accept them or not accept them as we move forward?
Yes, so thinking about the refugees of the world, of what human beings do to each other, and this can call out to you, and it's such a mess. It's such a mess. Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Other thoughts? For me, it was actually anti-Semitism in particular that was on my mind when I was reading it. You know, I have to go back and sort of judge myself, but I'm pretty sure that was the connection for me. Does anyone else see that particular connection? What are you seeing? Anyone? Susan, do you understand?
It's how were the Jews treated? And they were the other and to be feared and controlled.
Mm-hmm. I would say, yeah, I think how is this group treated as this group? How is any group, let's start off, right? How is any group treated as its group, right? To go back to Afghanistan, when we talk about combating anti-Semitism, really we're talking about also combating oppression of all kinds, right? And we, of course, as a Jewish community, need to have our eye on anti-Semitism and often need to help the surrounding world understand anti-Semitism, whether or not we should have, because it was a different question, but I think we do. And so we take on that burden, but because we understand generations of anti-Semitism, it's the Jewish community that often is able to offer a lens towards other forms of anti-oppression, right? We don't have to choose between this oppression and that oppression. We don't have to choose, do we care about ourselves or do we care about others? The answer is yes, right? So if there's, I don't know if there's such thing as good news in anti-Semitism, but the good news in anti-Semitism right now actually Deborah Lipstadt, a professor and leader in the Jewish community and teacher of anti-Semitism in our country and really in the world, has been named this position for the government, right? And will have this role in combating anti-Semitism, not only in her teaching. So it's interesting to bring us scholars' work into that leadership. What are you seeing in the world? When I say anti-Semitism, what are the worries or what are the observations that come to the surface for you? Is that on your mind? Siddharthi?
There was the news in Germany about the German Jewish teenager that was beaten up by 10 people because he wore a kippah.
We've seen violence, right? We've seen not only discrimination, but we've seen violence. Anything else come to mind, Ellen?
What I see is that those folks who are anti-Zionist, those people who are concerned about Palestinian rights, it can go so far that it verges into anti-Semitism, that the political moves into religious. And I think it's very hard on college campuses. I think it's a real problem right now.
It is. There was some news out of Rutgers, but there are many campuses, right? There are many campuses that are facing this. It's actually a serious focus throughout our 12th grade studies with our students here, part of our 11th grade too, actually, that are part of our preparations for our students to go out into the world. Most of them are going to college campus, but really to go out into the world is a study of what does anti-Semitism look like in the world? What are the assumptions being made? What is the voice you can bring to your campus? And tell the kids, I want them to find their people so they have a safe place. I also want them to find people who disagree with them because the world needs to know our kids. I think that would change the world if the world knew our kids, our relational students. And what else comes to mind when you look at the world around us? Rayford.
What I've noticed so far, last 20 years, 25 years, a lot of people they misplace. They lack proper guidance. They mean well, even if they're bad natured, they just need a little, like a tadpole, you just kind of show them the way, just to with the stream, the soft flowing water, you just kind of, push them in the right direction, pointing in the right direction,
Yeah.
You're not squishing them and get out of there, just kind of gently, massaging them back into the natural flow of things.
That's interesting. It's a reminder, right? Sometimes we need to take strong positions. Sometimes we just need to understand how does someone need influence? How does somebody need to connect? How can we teach somebody and like a tadpole and guide?
It's like an old building. They want to tear it down, they want to rehab it. Let's say you want to rehab an old building. But if all of us go in there, hard hats and this, and then you working on the walls, he's working on this, she's doing that, somebody's up there doing this, too much, too often, too fast. The building caves in. Now you gotta come rescue all of us. Because the building is sitting, you gotta do a little bit, let it settle, wait a week or so, a little bit more. All of us in there, all at the same time, everybody handling, everybody measuring, the building, it can't handle that. So you gotta do a little piece by piece. So.
And we hear stories of people who used to hate, who said somebody reached out, somebody from the group I hated reached out to me and taught me something and showed me something of love and something of gentleness, and that influenced someone's thinking is incredible. Stories are just incredible. I think Rabbi Friedman will be going more into depth actually on Yom Kippur on this topic, but another helpful lens I find is from Natan Sharansky, who is now in Israel, right? When I was coming up in the world, he was a refusnik in the Soviet Union, right? I remember his posters in the hallways of our religious school or our synagogue. And now in the administration in Israel, he has laid out what he calls, hopefully in English, what he calls the 3 Ds as tests for anti-Semitism, because we know that you can be opposed to a policy in Israel and not be anti-Semitic, right? And yet, there are those who have taken that opposition to a point where they judge the entire Jewish people, or they judge that Israel no longer has the right to exist because they oppose those particular positions or policies. And so Sharansky gives us these 3 Ds, and he says, if one of these 3 Ds is being demonstrated, that's a sign of anti-Semitism. He says, if there is demonization going on, if there is delegitimacy going on, and if there's a double standard going on. So, what was the first one I said?
Demonization.
Demonization means the whole thing, the whole problem of the whole Middle East is the Jews' fault, right? Until there's a state of Israel, there was no problem in the Middle East, right? Of course not, right? Nobody else shares responsibility. That's demonization. What was the second one I gave you?
Delegitimization.
Delegitimization is delegitimization of Israel's right to exist, right? You can say there are different forms that the state should take. You should say that there are different policies that the state should take. If there is a sentiment that Israel should not exist, that Jews don't have right to self-determination, that's a different thing. That's anti-Semitism. What was the third thing? What was the third D? Double standard. Right? If we're holding Israel to a standard that no other group or country is held to, step back and take a look. That's probably anti-Semitism. So I think those are 3 helpful Ds, because there's a whole lot that's not that. There's a whole lot of criticism of Israel's policies, of anything that you can include that it's not one of the 3 Ds. Right? So it's not that restrictive. It does not say you're not allowed to speak against policy. It does not restrict free speech. But I think that those are helpful structures to understand. So we talk about that with our 12th graders here before they go onto campus. I think that they're going to see that. They're going to see those 3 Ds on campus right now, elsewhere also. But I'd share that I was really glad to see that as a part of the diversity, equity, inclusion, and DEI, or in a large organization in Israel, in Philadelphia, they included in this series that they're doing with their staff, they included anti-Semitism in their series. And so they invited there's this large organization that thousands of staff members who invited me and other Jewish leaders in Philadelphia to serve on this panel. And I thought I'd share with you some of the sharing that we did with this group that is mostly not Jewish, this group of staff members, mostly not Jewish. And before I do, I wonder, what would you want to say? What would your agenda be if you were thinking about any group that's not a religious group, just a group in Philadelphia who is seeking to learn about diversity, equity, inclusion? What would be the messages you would want to impart to the regular world out there, regular Americans in Philadelphia? What do you think? What would your agenda be? What would your message be? Any thoughts? What do you think?
I think that people, it's like when they say a potluck, everybody brings something so that the people that's giving the house, open the home up, don't have to provide all the food, all the drink, all the bread, all the service. And people are not taking time to get to know one another. It's either about money, it's about politics, it's about religion, it's about likes or dislikes, or just dislikes and not likes at all. So just people are not willing to. I mean, I've always kind of been like, if you want to know the truth, I'll tell you the truth. But what difference is it going to make? You already got me labeled X, Y, Z, just that, and third. So what difference does it make if I tell you, yes, I did X, Y, Z? You already got me convicted. So the truth don't matter to you. You just want to satisfy some other agenda that you have. And you find that on both spectrums, district attorney, Mason, Christian, Baptist, Lutheran, you know, all these different denominations. But the thing is, the man is trying to move forward with his life. You're not blaming you, convicting you, why you still, you just out for blood for no reason. You just, you know.
So I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing a message to watch ourselves in how we judge each other, but I'm also hearing a message in how do we really get to know each other? How do we get to know each other as human beings?
Yeah, that's what I was going that way, but,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. We don't take the time to discuss and talk with each other. You know, criminals, that's the first thing they do, they start networking. But religious organizations, we don't, excuse me. Sorry that, we don't network as much as we ought to. We go a mile, 2 miles with each other, that's what the Bible says. But we need to be walking all the way with each other. Because the enemy, or the enemies rather, that's all they do, 24/7, 7 days a week, all month, all year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that's all they do. So us as Jews, Christians, Muslims, whatever people claim to be, we need to always do that. Because the enemy is always doing that, that's their religious network. So we need to always remember that, you know, that's our pact. Because they got their pact and we need to have ours, so. You know, my personal belief is that once you cross a certain line, you can go either side you want, but it's best to just stay where you belong because it simplifies stuff. You know, double jeopardy, all the different things, you can minimize the damage that way. Because a good mechanic will say, hey, you know, I'll fix this car for you, but once you buy a car from somebody I know, because that way you're safer that way. If you buy a car from them, now you run the risk of getting a bad car, you know, engine bad, transmission bad, shocks is bad, suspension bad, everything bad. And you have the law that says no. If we're 2 days after the law is not covered. Bad.
So I'm hearing understanding also,
Yeah.
but also learning. I mean, knowledge is a piece of what I'm hearing also, which I think is all relevant. Let's get some other comments. What are the messages? What are the agendas that you want into the world when it comes to anti-Semitism? An organization comes and says, teach us, right? Steve?
I think the starting point is an honest presentation of history. History is being rewritten, it's being forgotten, it's being changed. And I think a new generation of college kids have an opportunity to really delve into American history, world history, Israeli history, and set it right rather than watering it down, burying it, changing it. I
Critical.
was on some tours a couple weeks ago in Croatia, and there were a number of tour guides that I listened to, and I'd say almost without exception, all the bad things that happened in that place, especially in the 90s, were just completely buried or ignored. I attended some lectures by a professor who was very concerned about just that. These tour people were very knowledgeable, and they certainly knew a lot more than they said. But it's very, and there's got to be some change to that. And I think college kids are people to bring about change.
Yeah, and when it came to the panel of this organization, we started the panel with an historian. So we see we see there's a lack of understanding about history, and then there's actually a distortion of history also, right, with Holocaust deniers, things like that. So the historian actually went back well beyond the 20th century, and started with the foundations of anti-Semitism in America, and the dominance of Christianity and even white supremacy in American history was a piece of that as well. Good. Others, Stanley.
I'm concerned about how much of those 3Ds are coming from Jews.
Yeah, and people say, what does it mean when anti-Semitism comes from a Jew? I think it's a different thing. I think some people would call that self-hating Jews rather than anti-Semitic. But the concern you have is what? What are you hearing? What are you saying?
I keep in touch with a number of my high school friends from on Facebook, and I'm surprised that just how many of them know themselves as Jews or think of themselves as Jews. They were brought up in reform, classical reform. Probably most of them never went back to come out there and sisters on this business. And they don't want to be Jews.
So that's not starting necessarily with conflict around Israel or anti-Semitism.
They're the same ones who are, guilty of the 3Ds.
Okay. Yeah, I think that if I were on that panel, certainly the things that Stanley and Steve were talking about, but maybe also to just, I think sometimes people think of Judaism as being exclusive. They use the term chosen people, and we only see ourselves as different, superior than other religions. I think I would want to talk about some key principles in Judaism, like the Tzelem Elohim and Tikkun Olam, and just remind people that we are such a religion of inclusion and care for personal dignity and care of the world, and just remind people of the beauty of our religion. What is this thing of Judaism? That's great, and we didn't, it was definitely not the topic, it wasn't specifically not the topic of the panel, we're each given 6 minutes or whatever it was, but I think my heart was with you because I actually had to find a reason to tell everybody about our Introduction to Judaism class here. To say, we want to welcome people into the Jewish community or just into Jewish learning if you want to learn about what Judaism is. And I shared actually in that context, I shared that one of the ways I see that anti-Semitism is very much alive in the world, not only in those most dramatic headline-earning incidents, but in people's lives, is every year I teach this Introduction to Judaism class. Our clergy teaches a 15-week class with about 50 to 60 students, many of whom are not at all Jewish. Some of them have, a Jewish grandparent, but no Jewish education, something like that. And every year, there are students in the class who, when I use the term Jew, take that as a negative. When I say, I am a Jew, right? And somebody or multiple people will raise their hand and say, you just call yourself a Jew? I said, yes. They would say, thought that was a hateful term. And I said, it's not a hateful term, it's who I am. It's a hateful term because you've heard it used with hate, right? That's why they've heard it. But it's not a hateful term, it's an authentic way to express who I am, my identity. And so, being connected to this community is your opportunity to change its meaning for yourself. I'm not even reclaiming it. It was never not mine, right? Jew was always a beautiful way to express my identity, but that so many so often hear it as a negative in their conversations is a sign, it's a signal, I think, to me. Anything else that you would express? I'll add, Sadavi, you mentioned the violence that can happen around somebody's public demonstration, like wearing a kippah, right? Public demonstration of Judaism. And the ADL will tell you that Anti-Defamation League, who works all the time on anti-Semitism and discrimination and anti-hate, will tell you that there's research that there's a trend for Jews to less frequently wear outward signs of their Jewish identity. That in the past couple of years has happened. People who have been less likely to wear a Jewish star, Star of David, or a kippah. I'll tell you anecdotally, I've seen the reverse. I've seen the opposite, which is what I told this panel. And maybe it's because the Jews I know in Philadelphia feel safe ultimately, and that's not a bad thing. But I've actually anecdotally seen people in our community and friends and family that have chosen, in a world where anti-Semitism seems more emboldened, have chosen to put their Jewish identity out there even more so, partially almost as an act of resistance. So I've seen the opposite. I'll add the Pew study that comes out every so often, the recent Pew study from last year gave some really interesting data. And I think it's important to understand not only Judaism, not only anti-Semitism, but what are the Jews' response to anti-Semitism? What is our community's response? And the Pew reported that the great majority of Jews are afraid and increasingly aware of anti-Semitism. A smaller number of Jews think about that, like a third of those surveyed, think about that when they are going to do a Jewish activity, going to a synagogue. It's in the back of their mind, it makes them perhaps think twice or brings some reluctance. But a tiny, minuscule number of Jews reported to actually not doing a Jewish activity because they were afraid of anti-Semitism. Takeaway for me is the anti-Semitism is evil, and the Jews have not allowed anti-Semitism to stop us from being who we are, from doing Jewish stuff, from doing mitzvot, from gathering as a Jewish community, from keeping on our Jewish path. One last comment is the other piece I shared with the panel is another response that I think is really important in the Jewish community, another response to anti-Semitism, and that is our role in and responsibility in solidarity. When there are other groups vulnerable to hate who are targeted, it is upon us. We know, we've been there, and we want other groups to be there for us. And so it is upon us to show solidarity. It was you may remember that the shooting at the synagogue, Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, was on a Shabbat morning I was in the middle of a bar mitzvah service here. And right after the service, the way I learned about the shooting was I had a text on my phone from a minister from an AM church saying, I'm thinking of you, right? So that's solidarity. He was right there. And he was posting publicly and expressing his solidarity as well. That solidarity is for us. It's a reminder for us that we are in this larger world and take responsibility together. I don't believe, I mean, back to those original comments, can we influence each other? Can we increase understanding? I don't believe the world has to, from verse 6 here, has to have any Egyptians, as is the symbol here. I don't believe we have to be satisfied with anybody being these just sources of hate. There is understanding, there is growth, and maybe we can be among those who help to find the way, help find the way forward. So, wishing you meaning in this intense season of what it means to be a Jew, not only because of the outside world that brings us conflict, but the inside world that brings us into Slichut Tzedayim, into these Yamim Noraim, into these days of awe. We're going to continue in our service, turning in the prayer book, page 52. Let's also give someone else a turn who would like to grab the Torah. Jackie, would you like to run the total trust? All right, page 252, please rise. Results, around, I share some of strap, like carrying a stride along the unknown line. We are the ocean. What that was mine. Now I'm in trouble. 9, King God, Shalom Lavadel. Let us praise the name of our nine, for God's name alone is exalted. His Shalom, Hashirenu Adonai, Elah Yeshua, Hades, Hades Yamenu, Hades Yamenu. Page 282. Aleinu Shabbat, Latei Divine Celebration, Shavim Kishamayim Dios and Aras, Roma Shavim Kara, Shamayim Yinaham, Vishtinam Tuzavim Kenaronim, Ohayidu, Eino, Vadam Orim, Mishnaim Umotim, Limena, Malei Please be seated. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. This week, our congregation observes yard site 4. Mamie Schumann Abelson, Sylvia Edelman, Harold Applebaum, Eleanor Ruth Asher, David Basowitz, Jerome Beal, Samuel Bean, Emmanuel Beck, Max Becker, Marlene Beer, Harry G. Benneman, Laura Berkowitz, Jacob A. Biverman, Saul Brody, Sal H. Brockman, Mary Wayspain Brown, Emily R. Chernoff, Henry Didden Vance, Mildred Feldman, Alma Feinstone, David Frankel, Elliot Herman, Rebecca Gable, David Real Bursley, Eula D. Hammerschlag, Virginius A. Herman, Minnie G. Herson, Jacob Kalish, Cy Clemens, Theodore H. Kampnick Sr., Bernice Cass, Ida Cohn-Kind, Helene Stoughton Kleinman, Blanche Stanier Stern Koch, Rosalind Hogan, Irene Engel Levy, Albert Lyman, Sandra M. Mayo, Florence Miles, Irv I. Miller, Ruth Miller, Hetty H. Miller, Rosa Stein Miller, Milton J. Merman, Jeanette David Meyer, Francis Carnes Heitzman, Irving W. Brown, Ruth Rappaport, Edward D. Reinheimer, Charter Rickey, Bertha H. Roll, Nina C. Rosen, May Gansman Rosenbluth, Eva Sklar Rosentorp, Alice Melter Roskam, Catherine Siegel Soblonsky, Cy Solkowitz, William J. Sauer Jr., Leopold Schlesinger, Amelia Snitzer, Marie Schwartzberg, Zachary J. Seligson, Bernice Sharp, Ricky Marla Sharp, Max Schellen, Georgia Schuster, Natalie Silverstein, Radine Skronek, Elaine Sperling, Bruce Spoon, Sophie Steinman, Jacob M. Teller, Ellen Weiler, Florette Bauer-Reinberg, Mark W. Woldo, Sarah R. Wolf, Alvin E. Wolf Jr., Ruth Greenbart Zimmerman. We have the names of those who've been taken from our midst, but not from our hearts, in these most recent days, for whom we observe Shloshim. Martin Blum, Gordon Schwartz. And if you are remembering someone whose name I did not call, please feel free to add it to the comments or to speak it aloud now. Together we honor their memories as turning to page 294, we rise for the Mother's Couch. Yitkadal, Yitkadal, Shemei Rabban, Be'elam, Torah, Tevya, Yitkal, V'chayelom, V'yekrom, V'yekol, V'yisrael, V'chayelom, V'yisman Kari, V'yimru Amen, Yehei Rabba, V'yirah, V'yiklam, V'yiklam, Yisbarach, V'yishabach, V'yikar, V'yikram, Yitzaseh, V'yikadar, V'yikabah, V'yikabah, Shemei, V'shal, V'yiklam, V'yikram, V'yikol, V'yikram, V'yikram, Jews the Matam and the Matam, Sami Ram Be'al, Yeheshma Rabban Yishmael, Achayim Avinu Israel, Amen. Say Shalom Yirmah, Uyas Shalom, Avinu Israel, Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring comfort to the bereaved and peace to each of you. And together we say, Amen. Oh, say Shalom Yirmah, Uyas Shalom. Aleinu ve'al Yisrael, ve'inu. Amen. Page 358. We will conclude with the words from Psalm 27 we recite each day during Elul, Achat Sha'alti, and then we'll gather together for Kiddush in the lobby, and I'll say, well, we can do a mask check and just when we're in the lobby, and we do Kiddush, just when we take a sip, we'll take our masks off. But for now, everyone can do a mask check once again, and then I'll join you when I'm done here. Page 358. One thing I ask of Adonai, only that do I seek, to live in the house of Adonai all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of Adonai, and to frequent God's temple. Achat Sha'alti le'et Adonai, Otah v'akesh. Achat Sha'alti le'et Adonai, Otah v'akesh. Shivti le'et Adonai, kol yemei hayai, la'azot benoam Adonai, u'levaker be'ein avo, la'azot benoam Adonai, u'levaker be'ein avo. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
So is this somebody from Westchester? This was the absolute first time that I don't know, you said to someone, so. Oh, so he said you're a couple times. So maybe you grew up there and you moved out. Oh, you went to, so then you came back. Yeah, I think he's talked to Jeff about her, and I introduced this other guy, Jeff, Joe, with Henry and Chip, so you were walking back. Told us that it's really building, it's not. Southwest corner, it's like he lives in that building. So we were walking that direction, like we, so Joe, he's probably gonna call and check about what it takes to come on services. Yeah, yeah. And between Paul and I were told all sorts of things you can do in our.
I don't think there's a bar, so that-
Figure out who the city. It was in Foster. Okay.
All right, let's bless, let us bless.
It's a brain. The same pitch. That's what I was talking. But I'm just saying, should I take this table or leave this table off? Okay. We have the table that we put up at the library, the services, the chat. Then we finish the table.
Yeah, no, he knows more. Yes, and you said, come on, it's not more. This one was thinking, hey, you're here. Yeah. Is the cake with the design tomorrow? It's tonight. Exactly. Now we have all the salts, and lots of here. Well, I'm gonna make it because I think it was the next one. I'll mix about to a lot. So I'm not saying anything. Okay. Okay. The day is okay. I'm going to live. Yes, because I'm going to make it, so we call that, so I'm going to take it. Oh, you're doing it. Okay.
When?
That was this one. So
Is he still coming in there?
someone in the picture, not now.
Okay.
Okay, when's this meeting? Okay. All right.
Nobody knows go.
He said.
He said, "What do you mean?"
Yes, yes. I said, it's changing. He said, they're supposed to go outside, so maybe you can't find it, no. Or we have to say, he said, you don't know. He said, if they had, they had the house, like that.
Small. There doesn't want like 40 people.
He said, it's really small house.
The drop, you don't want to set up. Wait a minute, Jeanette.
And then Joe said it's just as a chapel.
Remember I was sitting, I kept singing chapel. I said, no, Jeanette, the service started in chapel tonight.
Yeah, he says, it does no project in the center. He's not coming in and he doesn't want to come in here.
He wants us to stay because he's gonna probably tell us to put the damn covers on. Elwood.
I don't know how to do it.
What?
Put the covers on.
He's gonna say, look at the.
He gonna say, look at the picture. All right. Jeanette, all right, no. Why